Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Nice to see everyone here. Good morning. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. Today is our group learning program where each Sunday and Wednesday I come together with students helping them to understand the path to enlightenment. Today we're going to be doing meditation together, of course, but then afterwards I'm going to be teaching chapter 16, which is titled Dissolving the Ego. Ego serves no purpose. This is where you start to understand what the ego is and the complications that you experience because of the ego. And then I'm going to teach you how to eliminate it, because as long as the ego is in the mind, you're not going to be able to be peaceful and joyful and have harmonious relationships. It's going to cause all kinds of complications in your day-to-day life. So I'm going to explain to you what it is, the complications that you experience because of it, so that you can see that your mind actually has this. And then I'm going to explain to you how to eliminate it. And that's part of the path to enlightenment, is to get to the point where there is no longer any ego in the mind. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way that we start is with some chanting. And I see many of you guys have the chanting sheets. If you need one, they're over there on the cabinet where you can help yourself to a chanting sheet and chant along if you'd like. For those of you guys online, you'll find this on our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. You can click on free books and then just scroll down towards the bottom and you'll see the daily chanting sheet there. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to remember the teachings. They would recite his teachings every 2 weeks. They would come together and orally recite them. This is the way that they would remember them, and then they could actually practice them, because they didn't have books and audiobooks. They didn't have YouTube and podcasts and all these kinds of things during the life of the Buddha. So they needed some way to actually remember his teachings because they were all oral. So they would recite his teachings through chanting as a way to commit them to their memory, and that's the way that they would then actually be able to practice the teachings. So you can see from the origins of chanting that this isn't a rite or ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that. There's none of those kinds of things in the teachings of the Buddha. If you see those things associated with the teachings of the Buddha, those are misunderstandings that people are having about his teachings, because everything he taught you is to train your mind and cultivate wisdom. It's not about doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. So if you'd like to chant along, you're more than welcome to, and you'll get more benefit out of the meditation by easing the mind into the meditation with the chanting. If you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of this, I don't think the Buddha actually even created these chants himself. They were probably created by his students either during his life or after his death, because a Buddha wouldn't go around and say, here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me. This would be ego, right? And as you guys just heard, you need to dissolve the ego in order to get to enlightenment. So an average and enlightened being would have no ego, and surely a Buddha wouldn't have an ego. An individual who's enlightened, they would just see themselves as equal to everybody. They wouldn't see themselves as being above others. So if the Buddha walked around and said, here, chant these things to me out of respect for me, this would be ego, and this would be arrogance and pride and boastfulness. And this is not what an enlightened being has in their mind. So I'm sure that the Buddha didn't create these, but if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, and frustration and all these other discontent feelings to the peace and joy that is the enlightened mental state, and this teacher didn't want anything or expect anything from you, you probably have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's where I think that these actually came from. So after the chanting, I'm going to guide you in meditation for a period of time. 1 second. There's some things. Oh, I'll just leave that there. After the meditation, or I'm sorry, where was I? So there's something going on the screen. I'm just going to let it sit there. Sometimes people come into Zoom and they try to crash our Zoom session. So they're kind of silly. Maybe they'll learn a little bit about Buddhism while they're around. So let's see. We're talking about the chanting. Then I'm going to be guiding you in the meditation, right? I'm going to be helping you to learn meditation while I'm actually guiding you. It's like instructing you while I'm actually guiding you during the meditation. So there'll be that period of time. But then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet, and we're just all meditating together. So during this period of time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds. You might hear a dog barking, a bird chirping, you might hear a car going by or something like this. You're not going to be able to be in an environment where it's permanently quiet, because that doesn't exist. right? You're going to hear things that are going to be changing. This is the universal truth of impermanence. Someone here might cough or sneeze. If you're in meditation with a craving for permanent silence, when you hear a sound during meditation, you'll cause your mind to be annoyed or frustrated or agitated or some other discontent feeling. But if you understand impermanence, when you see those things occurring or hear those things occurring, you'll just understand that it's part of the way the world functions, that things are going to arise, they're going to change, and there's going to fade away. So when you're in meditation, just know that you're going to hear sounds. That's normal. But if you don't have a craving for permanent silence, you can be completely peaceful and joyful when those things are happening, because you understand the world's happening exactly the way it's intended to function. Then after that period of time of quietness, we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start today's class, helping you guys to understand the ego. In terms of your body position for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you would learn these different positions at different times because you use them like tools, kind of having a tool belt and employing the different body position that works for you at any given time. So in the various courses that I teach and retreats, I help students to learn these different body positions. But today what I'll do is just give you a little bit of guidance on the seated position, so that for those of you guys that are just starting, you'll have some information to help you about meditating and getting comfortable with the body. There's not just one fixed way to sit or any of these other positions. It's not just one way to do it, because that would be permanent, and we live in an impermanent world, and everybody's body is a bit different. So you need to find what's comfortable for you. So what I'm going to share with you are just things for you to consider, or things like as recommendations, that you might be sitting on the floor, you might be in a chair, or if you're at home, you might be on a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair or something like this. You can sit however you're comfortable. On the floor, if you're sitting there, you might have some cushions under your rear. This will kind of soften your seat a bit. And if you bring your legs together in the cross-leg position, you might just choose to do that lightly, whereas if they're real tight, it can impede the circulation and cause pain in the lower body. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets your hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, allowing the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or on their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably on their lap. So you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. If you're in a chair, on a bench, or a sofa, or a wheelchair, you can also sit however you like. Some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles, but you can see me sitting in a chair here with my legs crossed, so this is an option for you as well. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of your upper body, it's helpful if this is erect, with your sternum up and your shoulders back. It'll help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Because if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull and lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So by having the sternum up and the shoulders back, it'll keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Because this is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert while you're training it. So having the sternum up and shoulders back will help you to be able to do that. And it also helps you to be able to breathe easily in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to do some chanting to ease us into the meditation, which you guys are welcome to join in on. And then I'll come back in with the guidance after that. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanang Apiwateyami Sawakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahata หะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังปุตโตภะคะวะติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath. the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakawata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone in class today. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. What I'm going to do is share with you chapter 16 of this book titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is our foundational text for this particular program of the group learning program and all of our other foundational programs as well. You can actually get this book for free by downloading it from our website. You can take it and go print it if you like. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon, because this is the best place to start to be able to understand this path to enlightenment that the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught how to move the mind to this peaceful and joyful mental state where you no longer experience any discontent feelings. And as part of doing that, you're going to need to be able to dissolve the ego. That's what this chapter is titled. It's called Dissolving the Ego. Ego serves no purpose. So I'm going to help you to understand what this is, the symptoms of it, and the complications you're experiencing because of it, and then how to actually eliminate it. And as we go, I'm going to pause a few times, opening up to any questions that you guys might have, whether you're here or whether you're online. You can ask questions. If you guys would like to ask questions and you're here, we have microphones in the white bowl here in the center of the room. All you need to do is get a microphone, take it back to your seat, press the gray button. You're going to see the lights come on. And then if you hold it up to your chin, we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then if you're not using the microphone, if you could just turn it off, that way we won't get feedback through the speakers. That'd be great. And then for anybody who's online, if you guys would like to ask questions, you can put that into the comments section of Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. So I'm just going to jump right in here and helping you guys to understand what the ego is and what the symptoms of it are, so that then ultimately we can spend the bulk of our class talking about how to eliminate it. But you first need to understand what it is and the complications that you're experiencing because of it, so that you can see why it's important to get rid of it. And you can also understand why you don't need it and that it really serves no purpose whatsoever. So first, let's just talk about what the ego is. The ego is a collection of your experiences from the past and the future expectations that you have of yourself. It's accumulation of your thoughts and your perceptions. A perception is like a view or opinion of what you think about the world that may or may not even be true. So that's what a perception is. And it includes your self-image and your self-identity. There's a certain way that the mind wants to be perceived by others. That's your self-image. And then there's a certain self-identity that your mind is holding on to, which we're going to talk about more here in a moment. This is part of the ego as well. The ego oftentimes is going to contain arrogance and pride, this judgment where you're judging other people, trying to determine what's wholesome or unwholesome for them. The ego is going to have you measuring and comparing yourself against other people and trying to decide where you are, whether you're above them or below them. This is where the mind can be boastful and, kind of have like a chip on your shoulder with your chest puffed out as you walk through the world. This is where you can oftentimes feel that you're superior to others or inferior to others. And both of these are actually just as dangerous for the mind. If you're putting yourself above people or below people, it's going to cause just as much complications. So I'm going to help you to understand more about this ego in the way that the Buddha actually taught it. The word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. This word was just invented in the last 300 to 500 years. So we're using the word ego, but during the lifetime of the Buddha, he used this personal existence view and conceit. These are the two things that he talked about that we're combining and we're calling the ego. In the unenlightened mind, the Buddha discovered these 10 individual pollutions. They're referred to as fetters. They're the 10 fetters. During the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were a criminal and they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. What a fetter is it's a shackle and a chain and a ball. And this would keep you confined. So today we put prisoners in jail cells or prison cells, but during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach this fetter around your ankle and just leave you in an open field. And this is how you would stay confined to that area. So when the Buddha discovers these pollutions in the mind and he uproots them out of the mind, figuring out the tools and techniques of how to do that, and then seeing that it produces this peaceful and joyful mental state that we refer to as enlightenment, he referred to these pollutions as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped and confined in this unenlightened state where it keeps experiencing anger and sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. As long as the fetters are in the mind, you'll keep experiencing these things over and over and over again. But when you uproot these fetters out of the mind, then the mind's free. You've purified the mind. There's no longer pollutants or taints or defilements in the mind. So just like a prisoner, if you release that shackle off of the ankle, they would be free and liberated. The same thing is true about your mind. When you eliminate these 10 pollutions or these 10 fetters, the mind is then free, that you'll see that it's not bound up with all these discontent feelings any longer. So an individual on the path to enlightenment would learn these individual fetters in detail of what they are, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate them, and how to know that you've actually eliminated them. But everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to helping you to be able to eliminate these individual fetters. Because as you eliminate these fetters, that's what's actually producing enlightenment. It's kind of like getting the clouds out of the way, and now the sun can shine through. Right? As long as the clouds are in the way, you can't experience the sun. So the same thing is true, is that some people might think about it like the mind is already enlightened, but there's these pollutions that are in the way, hindering you from being able to experience it. And as you peel away these pollutions, that's where the qualities of enlightenment start shining through more and more and more. So there's two pollutions or two fetters that the Buddha talks about that we're referring to as the ego. But it's actually helpful to understand them as two separate things because they produce completely different symptoms. And the way to approach them and eliminate them is different from one to the other. So let me explain to you guys what these are. It's personal existence view and conceit. What personal existence view is where the mind has this confusion or this misunderstanding, where it's clinging to the body in the mind, thinking that this is who you are. The mind clings to a self-image, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, and it clings to a certain identity in the mind. So, for example, if you've ever been in a social situation where you might have spilled something on your clothing and you were embarrassed in that situation, that's your personal existence view. That the mind has this confusion or this misunderstanding, thinking that this body is you and it wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And when you spill that food on your clothing, you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived. So the feeling of embarrassment arises in the mind, because the mind's not experiencing what it wants, which is to be perceived by others in a certain way. Or if you ever stood in front of a mirror, and maybe in front of your closet even, and you were thinking like, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to look? And you were thinking about the different clothes that you have, and maybe you put on a set of clothes and you looked in the mirror and you're like, no, that's not how I want to look. And then you put on another set of clothes and you're like, that's not how I want to look. And then you put on another set and you're like, all right, now I feel comfortable. I can go outside, right? This is the mind's personal existence view, clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. If you've ever noticed a wrinkle or a pimple or a mole, or you started having gray hair, or you started losing your hair, and you were shaken up by this when you looked in the mirror or you noticed these kinds of things, this is your personal existence view, clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be happy when you're being perceived that way. And when you're not being perceived that way, the mind's shaken up by that. This is the mind's personal existence view, clinging to this body, wanting it to be permanent, wanting others to perceive you in a certain way. This is regarding the self-image. But then there's a self-identity that the mind can cling to as well. This is around your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, maybe your job or occupation. The mind can cling to any of this as who you think you are. Like, I am American, or I am Chinese, or I am Brazilian, or I am a Brit, or I am an Aussie, or any of this I am. The mind can cling to any number of things about who you think you are as a person. And now you can only feel comfortable when those things are occurring. So, for example, if you've ever been in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend, and you thought, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, or I am a husband, I am a wife. Well, when you're in the relationship, there's a certain amount of comfort that you experience because of that. But when you guys break up and you're now single, the mind doesn't identify with I am single. And what you might have noticed is you might wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship because the mind didn't feel comfortable with I am single. It felt like it wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship because it thought that would solve the problem, because it didn't understand that the underlying true cause of this problem was the personal existence view, that the mind was clinging to this role of I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, thinking that that's who you are, and you could only feel comfortable when that was intact. Or say you had a certain job or occupation. Maybe like I am a police officer. And now, as long as you're doing that job, you feel great. But maybe you retire, maybe you get fired, maybe you get laid off, maybe you get injured and you can't do the job anymore. And now maybe you're driving a taxi. And the mind doesn't identify with I am a taxi driver. It identifies with I am a police officer. And now the person feels like less of a person. They feel unwhole. They feel disgruntled and frustrated because the mind is identifying with I am a police officer, but it's not doing that any longer. You can have any number of things that the mind might cling to of who you think you are as a person. And this is part of what the ego is experiencing, is holding on to these things. Because let's just say you're holding on to the identity of I am American, right? And now you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, you hear people talking in very positive ways about your nationality. Maybe they say, all Chinese people are loving and kind and warm and gentle, or all Brits are wonderful and lovely, or all Americans are, so friendly and loving and kind, right? And now you get all these pleasant feelings. It's like, wow, they're talking about me, right? But then 2 tables over at the same restaurant, somebody's talking in negative and degrading and disparaging ways about the nationality that you're holding on to in your mind. And now you feel frustrated and agitated and annoyed because they're talking about me, right? This is the mind's personal existence view, clinging to this self-image and this self-identity. And it causes you all kinds of complications complications, because now you'll be in situations where you get happy and excited when you're hearing positive things, or you'll get angry and frustrated when you're hearing negative things. So if someone says, wow, you look so beautiful, that shirt really brings out the colors of your eyes, you are so handsome, wow, I feel great. But then it's only a matter of time, because of impermanence, that someone's going to say something negative and degrading about this physical body. And now you're going to feel frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So you can't be completely peaceful and joyful, which is what the enlightened mental state is, as long as you have this personal existence view. And you can't have harmonious relationships, because it's only a matter of time before someone says something about this body or about any kind of identity that you're clinging to in your mind that you're going to disagree with. You're going to have a different opinion than this person. And now when they're sharing something with you, either positively or negatively about this body or this mind, you're going to experience conditioned feelings of discontentedness. So you can't be permanently peaceful and joyful as long as this personal existence view is in the mind. And now the mind can actually have pride and arrogance, and this conceit can come in because maybe somebody looks a certain way and now they go out into the world feeling really great and they feel boastful and arrogant and prideful. Or maybe they have a certain degree that they kind of adopt as part of their identity, like I am a master's, or I have a PhD, I am a doctor, right? And now they go out into the world with this conceit. So the personal existence view and conceit actually is forming what we call the ego. What the conceit is where the mind has this arrogance and pride, this measuring and comparing, thinking that I am above people or that I'm below people, looking down on other people. And now it's going to motivate certain intentions, speech, and actions when you're around people, that you'll get to the point where maybe you go into a social situation and you're trying to measure and compare who you're around, because you need to talk to one group of people one way and you need to talk about another group of people in another way. And now the mind gets very confused and even exhausted in this situation where it's constantly trying to measure and compare others and figure out how you need to talk to one person versus another. So this conceit is the arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing, thinking of yourself as being superior or inferior. And where these are coming from is our animalistic instincts and our animal existences prior to this human existence. Every single one of us are in this human existence, but many of us have had countless existences in the animal realm. And in the animal realm, we needed personal existence view and we needed conceit. Without it, we wouldn't have survived. So for example, when we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female, because they're teaching us how to hunt. They're teaching us how to survive. If we didn't know who the alpha male and alpha female were, we wouldn't have learned how to hunt and we wouldn't have learned how to survive. Or when we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because she's showing us where the food is. She's showing us where the watering holes are. She's showing us where the migration paths are. If we didn't know who the matriarch was of our elephant herd, we'd just be roaming in the jungle, not knowing any of these kinds of things. So we needed to know who was above us and who was below us in the animal world, because that's going to help us to be able to survive. But the thing is when we come into this human world, we maintain these, and these start to be developed more and more in our mind, where they get deeply rooted. So now, like I mentioned, when we go into a social situation, we'll have our chest puffed out if these are in the mind, where an individual might think they're arrogant, or they're above people, or they're superior to others. But also your mind can put yourself below people too, because if you put yourself above people, you're going to put yourself below people too. So that when you go into your boss's office, you might be shaken up, thinking that this person is above you, and you feel uncalm when you're around them. Or maybe you meet a famous celebrity or a politician or something like this, and you feel uncalm and shaken up around this person because you feel like you're below this person. This is because of the mind's conceit. And it's just as dangerous as putting yourself above people, because the mind can't be stable and steady. So there's this personal existence view in conceit that's in the mind that we're combining and calling the ego. Oftentimes when people talk about the ego, we think about conceit, but there's this personal existence view that you need to understand as part of the ego as well. And the mind can actually have conceit based on the personal existence view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here, make sure you guys understand this part of what I'm talking about, because now that I've split this out and I've talked about it as personal existence view and conceit, from this point forward, I'm going to actually talk about it as the ego, but then I'm going to split it back out again and show you how to eliminate these two. But I'd like to be sure you guys understand what it is that I'm talking about before we talk about some of the major complications that you experience because of the ego. So do you guys have any questions on personal existence view or conceit or what is referred to as the ego nowadays? Remember, if you guys could use the mics here, and those of you guys online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom. Any questions here? No questions? Okay. Let me see if we have anything online. Okay, I don't see any questions. Okay, so now that you're maybe starting to understand a bit about this personal existence view and this conceit and how we're combining it and referring to it as the ego, now I'm going to help you to understand some of the more complications that you experience because of it. What the ego is going to do is it's going to project itself onto other people, and it's going to read that reflection that's coming back to you as coming from the other person, when in reality it's coming from your own mind. It's kind of like walking through the world, looking out at the world through a dirty window and thinking that everybody's dirty, when in reality it's your own dirty window, because you're looking through the mind's conceit, in the mind's personal existence view, thinking that that's coming from others when it's actually coming from yourself. I'll give you an example. Let's just say you're in a business meeting and somebody walks in these really nice, beautiful clothes, and they have their hair so nice. Every single hair's in exactly the right spot. Their skin complexion is so amazing. They have maybe even some jewelry or makeup on. It's like, oh my goodness, this beautiful being, this handsome being walks into the room, and you're sitting there in the conference room, in the meeting room, and this person walks in, and your mind might think, look at them trying to look so beautiful. Look at them trying to look so handsome. When in reality, that's actually coming from your own mind. Only thing that's happened is somebody actually walked into the room. That's all that's happened, is somebody walked into the room. That's all that happened. But your mind, wanting to be perceived by others as beautiful or as handsome, projected that onto this other person. And we're like, oh, they are the ones who want to look beautiful. They are the ones who want to look handsome. When in reality, it's your own perception. It's your own mind that's clinging to this idea that you want to look beautiful and you want to look handsome. And now, just because someone walked in who you may consider to look beautiful and look handsome, the mind's now jealous about this. And the mind now thinks that it's the other person who wants to look a certain way, when in reality, it's your own mind that wanting to look that way. So there are certain unwholesome qualities that are within one's mind when they have personal existence view and conceit. There's certain unwholesome qualities beyond these two, and now the mind will project those unwholesome qualities on the others and read that as coming from others, when in reality it's coming from you. And now in that business meeting, when you're starting to be disgruntled and frustrated because you want to look handsome and you want to look beautiful, and there's this other person who you perceive as being more beautiful or more handsome than you, now when you're in this business meeting and this person speaks up and maybe offers some idea that is contributing to the group, maybe you're kind of disgruntled and frustrated, and maybe you even talk in ways that are degrading and diminishing to this person. And now the other people in the business meeting can see that you're talking to this person in a degrading and disrespectful way, and that reflects poorly on you, and now your personal professional relationships really struggle. And in this situation, you can't practice loving kindness and compassion fully. The last 2 weeks in this program, we've been talking about the 4 healthy mental states of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And then last week, we talked about true love, about loving all beings unconditionally. Well, you can't love all beings as long as this ego is in the way, because you can't see true reality. You can't see how this person truly is, that instead Instead, you're looking through your own ego, casting that onto other people and reading that as coming from them when in reality is coming from your own mind. So the mind's going to have this judgment where it's measuring and comparing other people and comparing yourself to them and considering yourself to be superior or inferior, trying to determine what is wholesome for other people or what is unwholesome for other people. So you need to get rid of this judgment where you're trying to measure and compare people. But the thing is that the mind in the unenlightened state has these perceptions, which are views and opinions about what it thinks about the world that may or may not even be true. The mind will cling to a perception. I'll give you this example that doesn't necessarily relate to the ego, so you understand what a perception is and how the mind does this. If someone was a police officer, they're often trained to not have perceptions because police officers are making life and death decisions on a moment-by-moment basis. And if they cling to their perceptions, they could actually make a life or death decision that drastically changes their life or the life of other people. So they're taught to not cling to their perceptions. So, for example, if a police officer was dispatched to a convenience store that is being robbed, an announcement might come over the radio, go down to that 7-Eleven, it's being robbed. We need you to go down there and take care of this, right? So they rush down to the convenience store, lights and sirens. They show up to the convenience store. They sling open the door and they see somebody with a gun, with a black hoodie, standing over somebody with the gun pointed at the body, and the person is on the floor bleeding out from a gunshot. Well, if the police officer clings to a perception, they might rush into the convenience store, pull out their gun, and shoot the person with the black hoodie that's holding the gun. And they might have actually just shot an innocent person if they were clinging to their perceptions, because this person in the black hoodie with the gun could actually be the cashier. The cashier might have managed to get this gun away from the robber and then actually shot the robber. But that didn't get announced over the radio in the way that the person was making their way to the call. They might not have gotten that information because it hasn't gotten relayed to the dispatch center yet. So a police officer is trained not to cling to their perceptions. They're trained to walk into the convenience store, sling open the door and say, "Police, police, put down your gun." Because if you're the person who is the cashier and you look and you see the police, it's like, oh, thank goodness the police are here. And you're going to toss the gun readily, right? Because now I finally got help. Thank goodness. But if you're the person who's the robber and they say police, 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 you might actually turn towards them with the gun. And now that's when the police are taught to shoot you, right? So if the person that's a police officer clings to their perception, they could actually kill an innocent person. And now they themselves are going to be in jail for murder for the rest of their life because they're making life and death decisions all the time. So that's probably not the type of life that you live, but you are making decisions about how you interact with people on a day-to-day basis. And if you cling to your perception of the way you think things are, that may or may not even be true. And now by you clinging to a perception of a false reality, something that is untrue, you'll make unwise decisions as it relates to that. I'll give you an example that you can maybe relate to more clearly. Let's just say you go to your child and you say, "I need you to clean your room. Can you clean your room?" And they say, "Sure, Mom, sure, Dad, I can clean my room." You're like, "All right, great. I'll be back in an hour. I'd like to see your room clean," right? And then you walk away, and then you come back an hour later, and you open the door to the room, and there's books all over the floor, and it's just completely littered with books. Well, if you cling to your perception is they haven't cleaned their room because you walked in and there's a mess all over the floor. But that's not necessarily true reality. That's why you can't cling to this perception of the way you think things are, the way that things seem to be. Instead, you need to ask questions to be able to get insight, to be able to understand true reality. You need to be able to ask your child, "Hey, what happened? I thought you were going to clean your room." They might say, "Yeah, I did, Mom. I did, Dad. I cleaned my room. Right before you walked in, I bumped into the bookshelf and the books flew all over the floor. And now I'm getting ready to pick them up, but you just walked in, so I'm talking to you now." right? So they might have actually cleaned the room and did exactly what you asked them to do. But if you cling to your perception of the way things seem to be, you might actually walk in and start yelling and hollering and screaming at your child, when in reality, they did exactly what you asked them to do. Right? So it would be unwise to yell and holler and scream at your child for any reason, but oftentimes they're false perceptions, these false realities, clinging to a perception is going to motivate unwise and unskillful conduct. So you're not interested in clinging to a perception. And with your ego in the mind, with this personal existence view and the conceit, you will have certain perceptions about other people. You will measure and compare them, putting yourself above them or below them. And now this perception that you're clinging to will motivate unskillful conduct and unskillful decisions. Not only can you cast these unwholesome qualities onto others and think that that's coming from other people, but you can even cast wholesome qualities that you have, wanting and longing, yearning for other people to actually do those same things. So for example, let's just say you decide that you're going to move to a plant-based food supply, and you're now eating and you consider yourself as, I am vegan. Right? That's part of your personal existence view. And now you have some conceit around that. You're arrogant and prideful, thinking you're above other people because you eat plants instead of animals. Well, now if you think that way, you might project that out into the world, having this craving, this desire, this longing, yearning for everybody to do things the same way as you. This is the mind craving permanence. And now when you see somebody who's eating plants, it's like, wow, look at them. They're so great. They're eating plants. They're just like me. Wow, we're together. But then when you see someone who's eating animal-based products, you might look down on them in a negative and degrading way and be disrespectful and arrogant to them, right? This is the mind's ego that's doing that. And now you can't love this being as they are, understanding that everybody is going to make different choices in the world. And just because this person chooses to eat plants doesn't make them any better or any worse than this person over here that's eating animals. Now, someone might choose to move to a plant-based food supply and realize that that is a wise choice, but whether someone chooses to do that or not, it's a choice for them to make. But it's when our mind assumes that everybody should do things our way, and just because we're doing these wholesome things, everybody else should do it too. And if they're not doing those things, they are below us. That's the ego. And you're not interested in having that, because now you can't love all beings as they are. Your mind is having this measuring and comparing, putting yourself above people and putting yourself below people. And this is just going to hinder you from being able to see true reality. Your mind's not going to be able to see true reality because this individual might actually be very generous. They might be loving and kind and compassionate and friendly, and they might be helping the community in so many different ways. But you're just looking at this one thing that they're eating animals, and now you're judging them and looking down on them because I don't eat animals, so I'm above everybody, right? This is not what you're interested in doing, because when you walk into these kinds of environments, you're going to talk down to some people, and then you're going to talk up to other people, and your mind's going to be unstable and unsteady and shaken up. It's going to be exhausting in your mind to constantly try to figure out who's above you and who's below you. And what you would like to be able to get to is that you just see everybody as equal. Everybody's on their own journey to enlightenment. And if the individual is unenlightened, they're an imperfect being, but that's their choice. That's their progress in life. That's their journey. And you're not part of that journey. You don't need to tell other people what they should or shouldn't be doing in life. Because if you're putting expectations on others and telling them what they should or shouldn't be doing in life, this is your craving and this is your conceit. You trying to tell other people what they should or shouldn't be doing, giving other people unsolicited guidance. And if you're giving other people unsolicited guidance, then that person's ego is going to try to come over the top of you, and now there's going to be this conflict. And when you start having ego, when you're walking around with arrogance and pride and boastfulness, people don't like that, and they're going to push you aside. So while in this animal realm, we needed the ego in order to survive, when you come into this human realm and you have this ego, people generally don't like that. They don't appreciate it, particularly people who are into wholesome things. And they'll tend to push you aside, or they'll be disinterested in associating with you. And you'll find that your personal and professional relationships really struggle, because you'll go around thinking that you're above people or below people, and your mind can't just reside peaceful and joyful around all beings, seeing yourself as being equal. So if you can get to the point where you see someone sweeping the streets outside, you can be like, hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Good morning. How are you? Right? And then you see the king of Thailand walking down the street, which I doubt you'll see, but you might, right? Or you might see the queen of Thailand walking down the street. You say, hello, ma'am. Hello, sir. Good morning. How are you? Right? You treat them exactly the same as you do the person who's sweeping the streets. And now your mind can be at ease because you just have one way of treating everybody: polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, right? But if you look at the people as being below you and you treat them in a disrespectful and degrading way, and then the people that are above you, you want something from them, so you treat them in a respectful way, your mind's having to constantly switch and figure out how to treat one person versus another. And this can be very taxing to the mind. And it's going to produce unwholesome results for you, because maybe you're kissing up to these people and you're looking down on these people, where you would like to just treat everybody equal. Be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to everybody, no matter who they are, what their social status is, no matter how much wealth they have or they don't have. You can just treat everybody equally. And that's what you can get to when you dissolve the ego and you eliminate it. So perhaps what you're coming to realize, which I actually have as the last bullet point here, is that this ego stands in the way of you having harmonious relationships with everybody. It stands in your way of your peace and joy and be able to navigate the world peacefully. So essentially, the ego serves no purpose. There's no reason to have this ego in the human realm. In the animal realm, it served a purpose. We needed it. But now, on the path to enlightenment, part of what this path is to become a better and better human being. That's what you're doing. Is that in the unenlightened state, the mind functions very much like an animal. Some people even think human beings are animals, but we're not animals. We're actually human beings. We're different than an animal. Not that the animals below us or above us, we're all living beings, but an animal functions very differently than a human being. But in the unenlightened state, as a human being, we function very much like an animal because we're holding on to these animalistic instincts, which as part of this path to enlightenment, as you're purifying your mind, you're becoming a better and better human being, functioning as a better and better human being, because we can evolve and develop our consciousness where we're not causing harm to other beings. But as long as this ego is in there, you're going to have difficulties doing that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to eliminate the personal existence view in conceit. But let me just pause once again to see if you guys have any questions on what I just shared here about how the mind experiences these complications as it relates to having this ego in the mind. Are there any questions here or online? No questions? Okay. All right. I don't see any online either. You have a question? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's right over there in the white bowl.
This is ill-formed. But like regarding judgment, I suppose a place I'm struggling is where like notions of justice are concerned, particularly in the world such as it is right now, where we're watching such like enormous injustice and so much pain being caused. I'm curious if you have any like anything more to say on that note in terms of like, seeing things that we feel to be wrong, and having a position on those things.
Sure. So yeah. So first, let's talk about the difference between judgment and discernment, and then we'll go into that. So judgment is the measuring and comparing, thinking of oneself as being above or below others and looking down on people, right? Thinking of yourself as superior, inferior. And this is something that the mind needs to eliminate because it only causes harm to yourself and it hinders you from being able to have loving relationships with everybody. There's something called discernment, which is wise decision making. And everything the Buddha taught is based in discernment and having wise decisions. So this is something you need to cultivate. While judgment is something you need to eliminate, discernment is something that you need to cultivate, where you're making wise decisions based on the natural laws. The Buddha is teaching you all these natural laws to be able to go out into the world and make wiser and wiser decisions that are going to lead to wholesome results. Or we refer to this as wholesome karma, or some people call it karma. This is cause and effect, or action and result, that whenever you make wise decisions, it'll produce wholesome karma or wholesome results. And when you make unwise decisions, it'll produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. So it's nothing mystical or magical. It's not about punishments and rewards. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's just understanding this natural law that everything that you experience is a result of decisions that you make. That when you make decisions, it's going to produce certain results. What we tend to do in the unenlightened state is when we experience certain experiences, particularly unwholesome ones, we will blame it on other things. We will say it's good luck or bad luck that I'm experiencing this thing, or that it's destiny or fate, or that it's God or some entity called the universe that is causing me to experience this thing. Or some people will blame others for what they're experiencing. That in reality, you need to be able to see more and more clearly as you study the natural law of karma, that it's your decisions that are leading to any particular result. You can see this very clearly right now. Like, ask yourself, who chose the clothes that you're wearing? Who chose the hairstyle that you have? Who chose where you sit right now? Who chose whether or not you had breakfast? Who chose the friends that you associate with? Who chose where you live? Who chose the job or occupation that you currently have right now, right? So we could go on and on and on. These are all choices that you're making that are leading to any particular result. And when we see certain things happening in the world, someone might have a certain opinion or a certain view or a certain perception of how that thing should happen. And when it happens that way, someone might say that, oh, justice has been served. Or when it doesn't happen that way, someone might say that, oh, that's an injustice. Where in reality, everything that is happening is based in this natural law of cause and effect and cause and effect and cause and effect. So you can't run and hide from the unwise decisions that one makes. From the outside looking in, someone might say, oh, this is an injustice because it didn't happen the way I think it should have happened. Where in reality, if you look more deeply, you can see that there's a cause and effect relationship here with the natural law of karma. So there's surely things that are happening in the world that are unwholesome or unwise, and many of us would prefer for those things not to occur, but those things are occurring because of decisions that people are making, right? That it's, let's just take something like war, right? We didn't make the decision to start a war, so we can't make the decision to stop a war. Or if somebody was arrested for murder, maybe their bloody footprint is at the murder scene, maybe the bloody murder weapon is under their bed, maybe they have blood all over their car, but they went to court and they were found not guilty. And someone might say this is an injustice, but that's because they're looking at the human laws, and the human laws are imperfect because they're created by human beings, and human beings have these pollutions in the mind, and as they're administering and enforcing laws, they can't do that fairly. We should always aspire for more and more equitable and fair treatment of all people, but we need to be able to understand true reality that because human beings' minds are affected by these pollutions, that you're never going to get to a time where it's always equal and everybody's being treated equally through the human laws. Again, we should always aspire for that to occur and try to get closer and closer to that. But because of the human mind and the way that the human mind works, it's prone to errors, and there's going to be mistakes through these human laws. So that's why someone can go to court who's truly guilty of this murder, but they're found not guilty, right? But they haven't escaped their consequences, because they're still going to experience certain consequences, because going to prison and going to jail is just one aspect of what they could potentially experience, but that's based on human laws. So there's difficulty in relationships, there's disease and illness, there's a loss of employment and wealth, there's difficulty securing a place to live, there's guilt and shame and fear that they have to experience within their own mind. These are all effects of them choosing to murder, and they're experiencing these results based in the karma, or the results of their decisions. So even though there's things that we would consider to be unfair that are happening in the world, this is all based on human laws. It's not based on the natural law of karma. This person who's murdered in this example, they're still going to experience the results of their decisions. It's just that you might not be there to see it when it's occurring. So I don't know if I answered your question 100%. You might have a follow-up to ask.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you. And because I'm interested from a standpoint of like an individual like living under like an occupation, and like who doesn't actually get to make choices for themselves each day. Or for those of us observing something like that, like struggling with not holding a harsh judgment on people who might be in positions of power when those things are happening.
Yeah. So what you come to understand is even those people who are in those situations that you just mentioned, there was still a choice that led to that. It might not have been in this life, but there was a choice, right? So as this cycle of rebirth is going round and round and round, the location of where we're born and what condition we're born into is based on our decisions from our previous lives. So now those decisions led to this life. Because if we would have got to enlightenment in our last life, they wouldn't be experiencing this life. So now we're experiencing this life. And now let's just say we're being held hostage or as a slave or something like this. There were certain decisions that we made that led to that. And now that we're in that life, there are certain decisions that we can make, be it very challenging and very difficult. There's decisions that we can make to try to move away from that situation. And it may end up being that we experience severe sickness or disease or illness or even death as part of trying to get away from that situation. But that is the results of decisions that we're making. And now we're experiencing those results. So what the Buddha is teaching you how to do is how to get rid of these pollutions, because those are motivating unskillful and unwise decisions. And he's teaching you how to cultivate wholesome qualities in your mind so you can make wiser and wiser decisions to then experience more and more wholesome results in your day-to-day life. And that's what's going to now produce the peace and the joy as your mind becomes more purified. And now you're making wiser and wiser decisions in your day-to-day life. Okay. Let me see if we have anything online here. You have a question? Yes, ma'am. We have other microphones around.
Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. So my question, I don't know, it might be two in one, but say like with relationships, right? We all have a little judgment in us. Okay, not all of us, but I suffer with judgment, right? Like the more I learn about spirituality, I have very spiritual friends, but then I see them partake in, I guess, the ego. And you were saying it's kind of like a reflection. So how do you know if you're seeing your reflection, your fear, or the person's shadow self, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure what you mean by shadow self, but
I guess a shadow self is another term for like ego. Like you have your spiritual, your enlightened, and then you have your animalistic, your survival skills. Okay.
So the Buddha's teachings are very straightforward. And that's one of the things that I think makes them so effective, is that they strip away all of these other things that people are talking about today. And he just gives you this really straightforward way to understand the mind and the world around you. And the way that you'll know what's happening in your own mind is through what we call mindfulness or awareness of mind, that you need to be able to look at your own mind. Whenever you're putting yourself in a situation where you're looking at someone else and you're trying to judge them or determine whether they're a good person or a bad person, and you're thinking about them in that way, that's your own ego. You can make wise decisions. Like, let's just say I grew up with a bunch of friends, and we've always been friends, and we've been hanging out since I'm 6, 8 years old, 10 years old. And we just all been hanging out as friends, playing video games, or, running around the neighborhood, riding our bicycles or whatever. But around 18 years old, let's just say one of my friends starts selling illicit drugs. And they start selling cocaine and heroin and crystal methamphetamine and all these kinds of things. Well, if I'm judging that person, I'm going to look down on that person, and I'm going to look at them as bad, as a bad person. And now I'm going to look down on them, and I might even go over here and gossip and slander about them, right? That would be unwise, because it's only harming your own mind to look at somebody in that way. But I could also look at this situation, understanding the natural laws and the teachings that the Buddha shares, and be like, that's unfortunate. I'm not going to spend time with this person anymore. I'm going to go over here and spend time with these people. not looking down on this person or anything, but just realizing that it's unwise to associate with someone who's selling drugs, illicit drugs like this, because we could be walking down the street and there's a rival drug dealer that sees them and I'm with them. And next thing you know, boom, 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 they're shooting a gun and now I get shot and killed. Or we're driving down the road in a car and the police pull me over for speeding. And next thing I know, my friend has put some cocaine under my seat. And now when the police search my car, now I'm going to jail for this cocaine that wasn't even mine. So what you come to understand is that there's certain discernment, wise decision making that you can make based on the teachings of the Buddha that he teaches you. And you can do that in a non-judgmental way, where you separate the choices and decisions that someone makes from the person themselves, where you can love the person and have nothing but a genuine interest in seeing them be well, but you can look at their decisions that they're making and just deciding whether or not you would like to be involved with a person who makes decisions in this way. And now when I choose to no longer be that person's friend, I don't look down on them. I don't degrade them. I don't gossip and slander about them. I just understand that that's what they're choosing to do in their life. And I'm just not interested in being around it. And I just choose to step away from it. So whenever you see that you're judging the person and looking down on them, that's always coming from your own mind. And you would like to get rid of that. And just focus on your own practice. Your goal in this life isn't to go out into the world and convince other people of what they should or shouldn't be doing, but instead just work on your own mind. And that's where you'll see the progress occurring. Mm-hmm. Yep, you're welcome. Okay, so now I'm going to teach you how to get rid of personal existence view and conceit. Remember, this personal existence view is where the mind is clinging to a self-image or a self-identity, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And now when the mind is being perceived that way, it experiences pleasant feelings. And when it's not being perceived that way, it experiences painful feelings. It's not other people that are causing you to experience painful feelings. It's actually your own mind that's causing this. And personal existence view is one of the things that can do that. So one time I was walking through my neighborhood and I was walking to go play basketball with my son, and I came out of the house and my neighbor said, "Wow, David, you are so fat." I said, "Yep, sure am," and just kept walking, right? Because he wasn't talking about me. He was talking about this body, right? And if I had this craving for everyone to perceive this body in a certain way, when I heard that, I would be upset and angry. Now, we can talk about whether it's wise or unwise to say those kinds of things, which I would teach you that it's unwise to say those kinds of things to someone, but you can't control what other people say and what other people do. So if you're walking around with this personal existence view, when you hear someone say, "Wow, you are so fat," if you associate that in a negative way, you're going to be upset and angry and frustrated. And it's not the other person who's causing that. It's your personal existence view in there wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, right? Because someone else might say, "Wow, you're so soft and cushy. You're so warm. Can I give you a hug?" Right? You can have someone else look at that fat on the body in a completely different way, right? But some people are going to look at it in one way and some people are going to look at it in a different way. But if your mind craves for everybody to look at this body in a certain way, you can only be comfortable when those things are happening. And when somebody else has a different perspective, you'll be angry or frustrated or annoyed. So you can get rid of this personal existence view where you don't cling to this body. You still take care of it and you still need to maintain its health, but you don't cling to it as who you think you are as a person. And you also don't cling to a self-identity of "I am Brazilian," or "I am Polish," or "I am a Brit," or "I am American," or any of this I am. You'd like to clear all this out of the mind. So here's the way that you would like to do that. The first thing is there's a meditation that the Buddha taught. It's called the meditation to realize non-self. And I teach this in some of the courses and retreats that I share. It's in this book, this first book in volume 11, that it teaches you how to peel away this idea that there's certain identity in your mind or certain self-image, that this is who you are as a person. It's a specialized meditation that you usually do once you get into what's called the jhanas. The jhanas are 4 preliminary phases that your mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. There's 4 stages of enlightenment that your mind will experience on your way to enlightenment. But before you get to the first stage of enlightenment, there's these 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through where you experience enhanced qualities of mind. And when you start experiencing those enhanced qualities of mind, if you know what the jhanas are, which I teach you guys what they are in the various courses and programs, now you know that your mind is in the jhanas, and that's a good time to start doing this meditation. Because prior to that, your mind's not really ready to eliminate this personal existence view. So this isn't something that you would jump out and start doing right away at the beginning of your journey to the path to enlightenment. But eventually, when your mind gets into those jhanas, that's a great time for you to start doing that meditation. You can also change your language where you disassociate the mind with these things like certain relationships, objects, or certain life situations. So for example, we might say, this is my cell phone, right? Or this is my house or my car. Or we might say things like, I am hungry, right? Well, I am not hungry. That's not true reality because there is no I here. What's true reality is this body needs food. That's true reality, is that this body needs food. There is no I here to be hungry if you eliminate personal existence view. Or sometimes we might say, I am thirsty. I am not thirsty. This body needs water. That's what it needs. It needs to be hydrated. Or someone might say, I am angry. No, there's no I here to be angry. What's actually happening is your mind is experiencing anger. The mind is experiencing anger. That's what's truly occurring. But when you continue to talk like this, I am angry, I am hungry, I am thirsty, the mind holds on to this personal existence view and thinks that there's a real I here. And you need to be able to shed that. So you can disassociate this by changing the language that you use, both internally and externally as well. Because this English language is really unfitting to truly explain what it is that we're experiencing. The Thai language is very different. The Thai language was created about, the language that we speak now as Thai, was created about 500 years ago. And by that time, Buddhism was already here. Buddhism came to Thailand about 800 to 1200 years ago. So when they created the Thai language, they created it with Buddhism in mind and understanding what the human mind needed to be able to do in order to be able to get to enlightenment. So when you talk in the Thai language, you don't say, I am hungry. You would say, David is hungry. Or like when my son comes home from school, I wouldn't say, how was your day at school? I would say, how was Bailan's day at school? That's his name, Bailan, right? So you're speaking in the third person, right? And it's not that I want to go get something to eat. It's essentially this being needs to go get some food, right? So the English language is really unfitting to really fully describe what it is that we're experiencing here. But you can actually modify your language and start using other vocabulary to help you disassociate with this. So instead of like, my phone, you could think, can you hand me the phone? Instead of, can you hand me my phone? Can you hand me the phone? Right? Instead of, I'm going to my house, I'm going to the house, right? Instead of, I am hungry, you can think the body needs food, right? And this is going to help you to start disassociating with this idea of a personal existence view or as a self. And this can work in about 95, 98% of the situations, but there's some rare situations where you're still going to need to use these words of I and my and things like this. Because if I introduce you to my son, I would say, this is my son, Bailan, right? But that's actually not true reality because he's not mine. He doesn't belong to me. True reality is this is the being that I contributed sperm to create over 13 years ago. But if I introduced him that way to you, you'd be like, this guy's strange. I don't know if I'm interested in getting to enlightenment, right? So I need to say, this is my son, Bailan, right? So that's the way I'll introduce him to you. And that works, right? My mind is saying, this is my son, but the mind also knows he's not mine. He doesn't belong to me. He is his own individual being, making his own individual decisions, and I'm not here to put expectations on him and control him. I'm here to guide him and help him to learn wisdom to be able to make wise choices on his own. So in about 95, 98% of the situations, you can disassociate. with this whole idea of I and my and all this other stuff. And you can use different language. And as you start doing that, your mind will start distancing itself from this personal existence view and start eliminating it to help you dissolve the ego. Then you're going to need to develop this perception of impermanence through observing impermanence in the world. What impermanence is that things are constantly changing, that they arise, they change, and they fade away. Everything around you is constantly changing, but the mind in the unenlightened state doesn't understand the universal truth of impermanence. It craves permanence. It doesn't understand that things are impermanent. This is why you grieve and you have sorrow when someone dies, because the mind's holding on and craving grandma and grandpa to be permanent, when in reality they are impermanent. This is why you're upset when you break up in a relationship, because the mind's craving permanence and wanting this boyfriend or girlfriend to be permanent in your life, when in reality they're not permanent. People often think it's their love that is causing their grief and their anger and their sadness in these kinds of situations, but in reality it's the mind craving permanence because it wants things to be permanent. And that's what the mind's doing with this personal existence view, is that it's clinging to this body, wanting it to be permanent. So now when you see a wrinkle, the mind's shaken up by that. Or if you see a pimple or a mole, the mind's shaken up by that because it's craving permanence. It wants this body to look a certain way permanently. Or if you have a certain identity in your mind about your nationality, for example, and you're craving permanence, wanting everybody to view your nationality as being good or nice or friendly or polite or whatever it is. So when you have this impermanence, when someone says degrading or disparaging things about your nationality, now you're frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So the mind's craving permanence while it lives in an impermanent world, right? So you need to be able to deeply soak into the mind impermanence to understand that the world around you is impermanent. And that's going to help you to eliminate this perception of the body being permanent or any identity in your mind as being permanent, that you can get to a point where you understand this body is going to be constantly changing, and that's okay. Right? You can understand that this body was born on a land that's referred to as America, but the mind doesn't have to adopt the identity of I am American, or I am Canadian, or I am Polish, or I am Brazilian. You don't need to adopt that identity of who you are, because that land, that dirt where this body was born, that doesn't determine what's in your mind, but our mind has been conditioned to think that this is who we are. So we can understand that that's not permanent. We can let that go. We don't have to associate with those things as who we are. You can also simplify your clothing and your appearance, because when there's personal existence view in the mind will, like I mentioned, go to your closet and you'll think, who am I going to see today and how do I want to look? Right? And you want to be perceived by others in a certain way. And now you can only feel comfortable going outside if you look that way. What I used to do when I was a teenager is I used to get out gel and mousse and I'd run it through my hair, and every little hair had to be in exactly the right spot before I'd go outside to go to school. And if it wasn't in the right spot, I couldn't go outside. I didn't feel comfortable. So sometimes I'd spend 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes, even 30 minutes trying to get every little hair in exactly the right spot. And sometimes I'd miss the school bus because of this, right? So you're not interested in doing this, that it's going to cause complications and difficulties in your life. So what the Buddha teaches you is to simplify your appearance in terms of your clothing and jewelry, makeup and scents and things like this. You can really simplify this. That's why the Buddha wore ragged robes, because he was training his mind, and he had trained his mind to not associate with this body as who he was. Because at one time he was a prince, destined to become a king. And I'm sure he wore very elaborate clothing, very fancy and elaborate clothing as a prince, right? But then he had to disassociate with that as who he was as a person. So he wore simple rag robes. So whether you wear rag robes or not is up to you, right? Not everybody has to wear rag robes in order to get to enlightenment. But what you can do as a household practitioner is you can take the mind's ability to make a choice about your clothing. You can remove that. The way that you do that is you take your clothing and you stack it up and you just pick off the top and you wear whatever it is on the top. And now you don't give your mind the opportunity to make a choice about what it is that you wear. And if you have certain things that you wear that are casual, like in your days off, and you have formal clothing that you wear when you go to work, well, you can line up your clothes for your formal clothing, and you can have your stacks of clothes for your casual clothing. So when you go to work, you just take your formal clothing, whatever isn't first, you just take that and wear it. And then when you have your casual clothing, you just peel off the top. But you need to be careful, because your mind's going to want to pull from the bottom or pull from the middle, because your personal existence views is still in there. And it's going to be thinking, who am I going to see today? You're going to try to pull from the middle of the stack. And you need to be able to see that that's your personal existence view, and you need to cut that off and let that go. And the reason why I know your mind's going to do that, because that's what my mind did. Even when I switched to these white clothes and I had all the white clothes stacked up, there's some of these white clothes that fit me just a little bit better than others. And I'd be going somewhere and I'd be like, I'm going to see that person. Let me get that. Oh no, let me not do that. And I would cut that off and let it go. And I just peel from the top. So you're going to need to watch over your mind when you're getting dressed. And if you have your stacks of clothes, just peel from the top. Don't allow it to grab from the middle or from the bottom. And this is going to help you with your clothing. If you shed your jewelry, this is going to help you. If you have like rings or necklaces or earrings that you wear, you might feel really comfortable when you go outside with these things. But if you don't have them or you misplace them, your mind can easily be shaken up. So you'd like to get to the point where you're just as comfortable going outside with them as without them. So if you shed them for a period of time, maybe 6 months or a year or so, you can go outside and be completely comfortable with all these accessories and see that, no, I can be peaceful and joyful without them. And now, at some point in the future, if you choose to wear them again, up to you. But at least you've already seen that the mind can be just as peaceful with them or without them. But if you don't shed them, you won't ever be able to get to that period of time. The same thing with makeup. If you regularly go outside without makeup, you would like to train your mind to be comfortable without that. And normally you do these things gradually. If you do it too abruptly, your mind doesn't really like it. So let's just say if I wore earrings, a necklace, rings, and stuff like this, I might slowly but surely start shedding these things. Or maybe I take off one ring today and I go out for 3, 4, 5 days or a week like that. And then maybe I take off another one, and now I'll go out for a week or two without that. And now I take off the earrings, and now maybe I go out for a week or 2 or 3 without that. And now maybe I take off the necklace and go out for a week or 2 or 3 without that. And it's going to be more comfortable for the mind. Whereas if you go cold turkey and you just take off all of that stuff, sometimes it can be too jolting for the mind. And then the same thing with scents, like colognes and perfumes. This is once again the mind wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. If you eliminate those things for a good long period of time, train your mind to go outside without them, this will help you to be able to let go of this personal existence view. And then facial hair and head hair is a really big one, that this will help you to be able to get past this personal existence view. That for men, they usually are able to shave their head pretty easily, but the facial hair they have a lot more challenges with. For women, it's usually the head hair. It's a lot more challenging for them to shave their head hair. Now, you can get to enlightenment without shaving your hair. It is possible. But if you're interested in getting to a point where you really move this envelope forward and really get to a point where you're eliminating personal existence view, shaving your hair is one of the best things that you can do to help you get past personal existence view. And that's why the Buddha shaved his hair, because he actually had this really long, beautiful, flowing hair, because during his lifetime, that's how they knew that you were a member of the royal family. If you had this long, beautiful, flowing hair and you went out into the kingdom, they would know that you're a member of the royal family, because it's only the royal family that could take care of this long, beautiful, flowing hair. Because those of us that worked labor jobs, we didn't have the time to shampoo our hair, detangle it, and take care of it so well. So the Buddha cut off his hair as a way of shedding this personal existence view. So if just the idea of shaving off your hair, it's like, I don't know if I could do that. That's your personal existence view. Being disinterested and feeling uncomfortable with even the thought of shaving off your hair. And what you might notice if you do shave off your hair is that not only are you attached to it, but people around you will be too. I've had students that have shaved their hair, females and males as well, and their life partners, their children, their parents, they have a lot of issues with that. And that's because of their attachment to your hair. So not only are you going to be helping yourself, but you're going to be helping those people to let go of wanting you to be a certain way. because oftentimes family members will put their expectations on you and try to control you and force you to be a certain way. So cutting off your hair will help them to be able to let go of their attachment to wanting you to be a certain way as well. And this is another one of those things where you might do it for a year or 2 or 3 or however long, and then you might decide, I'm just going to grow this back because I just kind of like having hair. But you felt completely comfortable going outside with hair as without hair, and you're just as content and as peaceful. But you're never going to know that unless you actually do this for yourself. Then there's cutting off and letting go of the arising of personal existence view. In any situation where you see personal existence view arising, you would like to cut that off and let it go. So say you're at a social event with friends and you guys are sitting around a table at a restaurant and you guys are talking, and somebody says like, oh wow, you look so beautiful in that shirt. It really brings out the colors of your eyes, and you notice the pleasant feeling arising because of that. You'd like to cut that off and let it go. Don't allow your mind to get that pleasant feeling, because if you do, then when someone says something degrading and disparaging, you'll get the painful feeling as well. So whether there's conditioned pleasant feelings arising or the conditioned painful ones arising, you're going to need to cut that off and let it go. And ideally, you would catch it as a bodily sensation, where the bodily sensation is arising before it actually becomes a feeling. So this is where the Eightfold Path comes in, that you need to know this core central teaching of the Buddha to watch over your mind and cut that off and let it go. And then the last one here is to seek guidance from a teacher, that you're going to need help to understand more about what this personal existence view is. Sometimes when I first start talking about it, students don't understand what the personal existence view is. And here, this is chapter 16, but in the book, if you've been in this program and you've been reading the book, I talk about it at multiple times through the program, and then now we're actually diving into it. But some of you guys, it's your first time here, so you might be struggling just to understand what even personal existence view is. And if that's where you are, it's okay. That's where you seek guidance from a teacher to be able to understand it more, and you understand the complications that it's causing you, and you learn how to eliminate it. There was a student one time who contacted me. He said, David, I need your help. I said, okay, what do you got going on? He said, ever since COVID, I'm having all these difficulties and I don't understand why. I said, really, what's going on? He said, well, I go into these stores that I used to just pay my money. I'd place my order, like for a coffee, take me 30 seconds to place the order, and I give them my money, and then I get my coffee and I walk out, no big deal. But now I go to these places, and because of contactless payment, they turn around the computer screen and I have to tap my credit card, but it asked me for a tip, 20%, 25%, 30%. And he's like, I am a good tipper. I am a great tipper. And everywhere I go, I always tip. But in some of these places, I don't think I should tip because I only talk to them for 30 seconds. They take my order, I get a coffee, and then I move on with my day. Why should I have to tip? I am a great tipper, and I feel so uncomfortable in these situations, and I don't understand why. And I said, this is your personal existence view. Your mind is clinging to the identity of I am a great tipper. And when you're tipping, you feel great. You feel wonderful. But when you don't tip, you feel like less of a person. You feel unwhole. And you need to get rid of that identity of I am a great tipper. And now you're going to need to go around in certain places and intentionally not tip in order to train your mind to be comfortable in this situation. Because the solution isn't to just tip everywhere you go, because that's permanence. You're not going to be able to tip everywhere you go. So you're going to need to be able to get comfortable to sometimes tip and sometimes not tip. But that's the craving for permanence that this person's mind had, is they wanted to be perceived as a great tipper. And when they weren't tipping, they felt like less of a person and they felt uncomfortable. So this person needed guidance to be able to see this and understand that. So when you guys need guidance about how to eliminate personal existence view, just reach out and I'm here to help you. So do you guys have questions on this? Dissolving personal existence view? Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to avoid being conditioned, having the mind conditioned in the first place? For example, in certain cultures, it's a good idea to be fat. In others, it's like a sin to be overweight. It's, certain expectations of us Certain behaviors are expected. So how do we come into this world and not have our minds conditioned to all of the things that we have to later eliminate?
The fact that you're in the world means that your mind is conditioned. That's the whole reason why you're being reborn, because the mind didn't get to enlightenment in its previous life. So the causes and conditions that are producing your rebirth is allowing your mind to have what's called a lack of wisdom or ignorance or unknowing of true reality. Because of the mind's lack of wisdom, it will get conditioned no matter what situation you're born into. Even if you're born into a situation where people know these teachings inside and out, your mind will get conditioned to adopt certain self-image and certain self-identity because of its lack of wisdom. And as you age, that's where you have the opportunity to gain the wisdom, to realize how unwise it is to have this in your mind. Then you can eliminate it. So like my son, I started formally training him when he was 6 years old. I was doing things with him prior to that, but at 6 years old is where I started formally training him, because that's where he could understand things like personal existence view and stuff. And it still took him several years to eliminate personal existence view, because your mind needs to gain the wisdom of how to do that. And then you need enough situations to be able to do it. Because when he was growing up, ever since he was born, when we were in the labor, when he was delivered, the nurses started calling him handsome. So it kind of stuck, and we were calling him handsome boy, handsome boy, handsome boy. A lot of people were calling him handsome boy, right? So that's what conditioned his mind from birth. He was like, as soon as he came out of the womb, the nurses started calling him this. So it just kind of stuck. So then if someone called him ugly, initially he didn't like that, right? Because his mind was conditioned to think of himself as handsome boy, right? So because of the lack of wisdom, at that age, the mind is going to adopt this personal existence view. But now as you age, you get the wisdom to be able to learn how to get rid of it. And now you get rid of it. And that's your journey to enlightenment. That's the purification of the mind. And by being here in a place like Thailand, you're surrounded by people who understand this kind of stuff. Then you can learn it, gain that wisdom, right? Okay. So let me now help you to understand how to eliminate conceit. With conceit, remember, this is the arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing, putting yourself above people and looking down on them, or putting yourself below people and looking up to them and being shaken up and uncalm. So one of the things that the mind doesn't do when it has conceit, because it thinks it's above everybody, is it doesn't use words like thank you, sorry, or speaking politely like using sir and ma'am and things like this. At one time, this used to be pretty prevalent in the English language, but it's not there so much anymore. So if the mind's walking around being conceited and prideful and boastful, it won't do these kinds of things. So you'd like to humble the mind. You're not putting yourself below people, but you would like to knock the mind down and be more humble, right? So by using things like thank you, you're welcome, sorry, sir, ma'am, things like this. This shows that you're being polite and respectful to the people around you, and it will also humble the mind because you just see everybody as equal. So I know many of you guys speak other languages besides English. So you're going to need to look inside those languages and see what are the words that you can be using to humble the mind that maybe aren't even really used very much today, because the way that the world practices and the way that an enlightened being practices is going to be completely different. So if you just follow what other people are doing around you, you won't get to enlightenment, because the vast majority of the world isn't practicing the things that we're talking about here in terms of getting to enlightenment. The world is murky. It's like murky water, and you need to grow through that murky water and rise above it. Not seeing yourself as above people, but you need to rise through and above this murky water. So continuing to do things the way that everybody else does it isn't going to lead to your enlightenment. So just because other people aren't using these types of things doesn't mean it would be unwise for you to not do it, right? So you would be interested to actually do these things where you're speaking polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in all situations. And this is going to help humble the mind. One of the best things you can do for conceit, this is something the Buddha taught, is to sleep in a low position. right? Here in Asia, people tend to sleep pretty low, in a low position. This is pretty prevalent, particularly here in Thailand. It's challenging to find a bed that is very high, right? Usually the beds are from the knee height or below. It's very rare that you'll find a bed that is high. And the reason why is because that promotes ego in the mind. So you would like to be sleeping down on the floor, meaning like maybe you take your mattress and you put your mattress down on the floor. You really don't need a frame and a box spring and all those things to prop the bed up so high. But if you look in the cultures that have a lot of ego, they tend to sleep very high. And I know this might sound strange to some people, like you can change your sleeping position and that's going to change how your mind thinks. Yes, it does. Because by going down into bed each day and getting up out of bed each day, it's going to humble the mind. So if you just take 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes to put your mattress down on the floor, this is going to be able to help you reap the rewards of that for many, many months and years to come. It's one of the few things that you can do like that, where you just spend 3 minutes, 5 minutes doing it, and boom, you've got all these benefits for many months and years to come. So I would definitely encourage you to do this. The shaving the hair, adjusting the clothes is great for personal existence view. That's what's going to really break through that. Sleeping on the floor is what's going to really break through this conceit. So whether it's here, if you live here, or whether you travel, or whether you go home and you live in a certain home, if you can sleep in a low position, this would be ideal for you. If there are certain tasks that you think are beneath you, like scrubbing a toilet, scrubbing the floor, washing dishes, things like this, it would be wise for you to do those things, because oftentimes the mind will think that you're above those kinds of things. So you need to be able to get your hands dirty and get in there and do those kinds of things. And this is going to help to humble the mind. Oftentimes when there's conceit in the mind, you're not interested in listening to other people to teach. Now, you guys are doing that here, where you're listening to someone teach and you're not trying to teach me anything. So this is helpful for you to come to a place like this and be able to hear someone teach and not try to teach that person anything whatsoever. But you'd like to also replicate that in other parts of your life too. When you get together with a group of friends, maybe some of those people you've never met before, and now you guys are sitting around a table at a restaurant and somebody starts talking about how great they are because they're not studying these teachings, and they're talking about how great they are and all the accomplishments that they've done and what they've achieved in life. Well, if your ego's in there, you're going to want to come over the top of them. You're going to want to tell them all about all the great things that you've done in the world, where you're not interested in doing this. So you can just go places where you hear people talk and you hear people teach, and even in a social situation, without any desire to teach that person anything. This is going to humble your mind. Also, another thing that's really helpful for the mind in regards to conceit is washing people's feet. If you wash people's feet, like your parents or your grandparents, some people do this for their teachers, anybody who's really been impactful to your life, this can be really helpful. It's a great way to show care and appreciation and gratitude for that person, but it also humbles your mind. Thai people do this on their birthday or at New Year's or things like this, where like in the Western world, when it's our birthday, it's like my birthday, it's all about me. Thai people flip the script here, that when it's your birthday, you actually usually will invite a bunch of your friends and people who have been impactful to your life, and you invite them out to dinner, and you actually pay for everything, or you host a dinner at your house, and it's you that's hosting an event to say thank you to everybody for contributing to your life. So this is the way Thais will tend to celebrate birthdays. And oftentimes what they'll do at New Year's or Mother's Day, Father's Day, on their birthday or things like this, is they will go visit some of their relatives or maybe people who have been impactful to their life, like teachers and things like this, and they will wash their feet. It only takes about maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes to do this kind of thing, but it humbles the mind when you're doing this. I did this for my mom and my grandmother when I used to live in the USA. I was practicing this kind of thing. And when I did it the first time, I was a bit shaken up, because that's the ego. That the ego is kind of short-circuiting. It doesn't want to put itself down on the ground, because I was down on my knees washing my mom's feet, and my mind didn't want to do that, and it was uncomfortable. It was shaken up. So let that be the reminder for you that you're actually triggering the conceit. You're triggering the ego, and now that's an opportunity for you to cut it off and let it go. This is really helpful for your mind. You can show respect and gratitude to all people with a Y. You guys know what that is probably because you're here in Thailand. And this is becoming more and more of an international symbol of being thankful or having gratitude. I even see like celebrities doing this when they're on award shows and stuff. They will get awards for whatever it is that they're doing, and they will thank the audience, or they will thank their cast members or their producer or their executives. So more and more, this is becoming an international symbol of appreciation, gratitude. I've done this in America. When I check into hotels, I will say, "Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. How are you?" When I went to Egypt, Assalamu alaikum, right? I was wowing people in Egypt. Same thing when I go to other places around the world. When I went to Mexico, hola, ¿cómo está? Right? Everywhere you go, you can actually use this as a way of showing appreciation and gratitude. And it also humbles your mind. If 15, 20, 30 times during your day, you're doing this is going to humble your mind. I used to ride a motorbike in the neighborhood where I live, the village where I live. There's a gate where the security guards open the gate for you when you go in and out. Even when I'm riding my motorbike, which I don't ride anymore, I used to bow my head as I was going through the gate to say thank you to the security guards, right? So you just treat everybody this way, and it really humbles your mind. You're not putting yourself below them. You're just showing appreciation and gratitude, and it'll humble your mind. So you can show respect through that. Let me see what this other one is. Oh, okay. So our projector's a little bit off here. So this other one is to show loving kindness and compassion and practicing generosity. This will really help you where you're giving and sharing with others more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. If you practice generosity with people, this will help humble your mind. Practicing loving kindness, which is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, and practicing compassion, which is the concern for the misfortune of others. That's going to help you to eliminate conceit as well. Wherever you see your mind comparing people and having yourself as being superior or inferior to others, you'd like to let that go. You like to cut it off and let it go. If you have a Facebook profile and some of your colleagues have a Facebook profile and you're trying to compare who has more friends, right? This is your conceit, right? You'd like to cut that off and let it go. Don't allow the mind to do that. You can be kind and gentle because it's the right thing to do, not because anybody told you to do it or you want anything from other people, but you just understand that it's wise to be kind and gentle. You can ask people advice about what they've learned in life without having a desire to try to teach them anything. Going around older people, but even younger people. Sometimes I ask my son, I'm like, what did you learn today? And he will teach me something that he learned. I'm like, wow, that's really good. Wonderful. Right? Even my son, I will call him yes, sir. Right? I will say that to him occasionally as I'm interacting with them. So you can do this with young people, with older people, with people your age, that you can ask them questions about what they've learned in life. And then you can learn from that without a desire to teach them anything. You can help others. This is a practice of generosity without any expectation of anything in return or any positive thing for yourself or any positive benefit for yourself. Seeking guidance with the teacher helps the mind to admit to itself that it doesn't know everything about this world, right? When you come to a place like this, you would like to be able to learn from a teacher. This is one of the reasons why you actually need a teacher in order to be able to get to enlightenment, is that you need to be able to humble the mind enough to be able to understand that you don't know everything about this world, that you're going to need help and guidance to be able to understand and grow and develop. Anytime you see your mind projecting arrogance or pride or ego, you'd like to cut that off and let it go. Other people are going to have ego. Other people are going to have conceit, but don't allow your conceit to rise up above that. So if you go into a social situation, a party, and people are like, so what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a lawyer. And they're like, oh, I'm a doctor. Right? So don't allow your mind to try to come over the top of them. If you're a doctor or you're a taxi driver or you're a food server or whatever, these are just roles that we fulfill. These are the things that we do in order to contribute to society. It doesn't make us better. It doesn't make us worse because of what we choose to do in order to sustain our life. Hey, if you enjoy being a taxi driver and you just thoroughly enjoy that, then do that, right? That doesn't mean you're less of a person. I met somebody one time in Bangkok that they had a multi-million-dollar company. They had over 250 employees. And as they were training their mind on this path, they actually sold their company and decided to drive a taxi. And all they were interested in doing was taking people from the airport back and forth from the airport to this temple that was about an hour away from the airport. And that's all they do now, is they just drive this taxi back and forth. And I imagine they have multi-millions of dollars in their bank account, but they're just so pleased just driving that taxi back and forth, helping people to get back and forth to the temple. And that's it. Right? They don't see that as being below what they used to do or above what they used to do. They just thoroughly enjoy contributing that ability for people to have transportation from one location to the other, to be able to get access to the teachings of the Buddha. So what you choose to do as an occupation doesn't define who you are. If you're unemployed, that doesn't define who you are either. You're not going to always be employed. Sometimes you're going to have a job, sometimes you're not, and that's okay. That doesn't define who you are. How much money you make doesn't define who you are as a person, right? So you can, anytime you see that trying to come up in the mind where there's this arrogance and pride, cut that off. Don't allow the mind to do that. And then the last one is to seek guidance over multiple sessions with the teacher, because you're going to need help. Because the way that the ego works is you're not going to be able to see your ego in all situations. The ego is very tricky. Right? The ego is like a bad tenant, that it's in there. It's trying to convince you that you're more enlightened than you really are. It's kind of like this bad tenant that doesn't pay rent, doesn't give you any money, but it just keeps figuring out a way to stick around. And every time you think you got this ego out of there, you keep slipping back in, right? So you need to be really diligent to be able to stay on top of it and get to the point where you never convince yourself that the ego has actually been eliminated. Because the ego is going to try to convince you that it's gone so that it can stick around for longer. That's the same way that a bad tenant's going to do, right? They're going to keep telling you the check's in the mail, the check's in the mail, the check's in the mail, the check's in the mail. Just give me a little bit more time. Just give me a little bit more time, right? But it's not giving you any benefit. And it's the same thing with the ego. It's not giving you any benefit, but it's going to keep trying to figure out a way to stick around. So don't allow the ego to convince you that it's gone. One of the best ways to know that someone's got ego is if they tell you that they don't have ego, right? Because why, if you don't have ego, why do you need to go around and tell people that you don't have ego? So just stay humble and never convince yourself that it's gone. Just be diligent and dedicated to continue to work on it. If you guys know that game Whack-A-Mole, where there's moles that are coming up and they're constantly coming up, and you've got this mallet and you need to keep hitting them and hitting them and hitting them and then knock them back down. Well, if you hold the mallet to your side and you think the game's over, when the moles come up, you're not going to be able to hit it, right? But if you never convince yourself that the game's over and you just kind of stay there diligently with your mallet, as soon as the mole comes up, you can whack it and whack it and whack it, right? But if you convince yourself game's over and you're holding the mallet to your side, you won't be able to whack it when it comes up. So when the ego comes up, don't convince yourself that it's gone, because you'll miss it when it's coming up, because you would like to whack it and knock it back down, right? And eventually you'll get to the point where it's completely gone out of the mind. And that's where your peace and your joy will come in more and more, because you can just love all beings and see everybody as being equal. So you guys have any questions on anything I've been sharing with you guys today? No questions? Yeah, go for it.
I'm curious, particularly, for instance, like raising a young person, and presumably not trying to grow ego. Mm-hmm. How do you offer words of encouragement about, for instance, his character or any other features that I have?
Sure. So what we do is we talk about the decisions that he makes rather than him as a person. Right. So whenever he makes a decision, either wisely or unwisely, we talk about that, where I'll say, wow, that was a really wise decision that you made. And here's the reasons why that was wise. And here's how it's going to create beneficial results in your life. Or that doesn't look like a very wise decision. Let's talk about it. And now we talk about all the factors of that decision being unwise. So if you separate the choices and decisions someone makes from the person, then you can talk about the choices and decisions without talking about the person. Because when you talk about the person, that's where the ego comes up. So that's how you would like to do that. And initially, I needed to teach him about what the ego is and how to dissolve it and all the complications and all that kind of stuff. And then helping him to get rid of his ego. And then as I noticed that his ego was being eliminated, then I actually flipped it, where I would actually try to get his ego to arise. So like maybe he's sitting there playing video games and he's doing a really good job playing the video games, and there's maybe like 100 people online playing video games with him. And I'm like, wow, look at you. You got the top score. I bet you think you're better than everybody, don't you? And he's like, no, I don't think so. I'm just playing games. I'm just having fun. It's like, nah, you're like better than everybody. Look at you shooting all those people. You're like so good. You're like better than everybody. And he's like, no, I'm just playing the game, just having fun. Right. So I try to like get his ego to come up. And that's where if it comes up, he's got to cut it off. So what you would like to do is be able to teach them, talk about their choices and decisions. That's going to help you to then not talk about the person. But then when you see the ego is diminished pretty significantly, you would actually like to flip it and actually try to arise their ego. But now they have all the tools that they need to be able to cut it off and let it go. Mm-hmm. All right. So you have a question? Yep. No, hey, if you have a teacher who's upset with questions, you're studying with the wrong teacher.
Yeah, I ask a lot of questions.
Good.
So my question goes back to, you were talking about how like we look and we could shave our head. How do you differentiate between health, taking care of your health, your mind, body, soul, versus ego, I guess? Because for me, I'm very into working out, very fitness, eating healthy, but I don't do it just to look good, because either way I'm skinny. I do it because mentally it makes me feel better and takes me out of depression. Mm-hmm. So how do you differentiate the two, if that makes sense?
Yeah, this is again where your mindfulness comes in. You haven't learned the whole core Eightfold Path yet. That's something I'm going to be teaching tomorrow. If you guys would like to come for the course tomorrow, it's Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. It's called Harmony in Relationships. This is where I'm going to teach you all about how to develop harmony in your relationships. The first thing I'm going to be teaching on Monday morning is the Eightfold Path. That's the core central teaching of the Buddha. And this is something that by chapter 16, people would have already typically learned that. But of course, people come at different times. But there's something called mindfulness or awareness of mind, where you overlook the mind. Because it's not just the action. It's not just the fact that you work out that determines whether there's ego involved or not. Because you could work out with ego, but you could work out without ego too. If someone goes to the gym and they're like primping in the mirror and looking at themselves, and when someone walks in that has less of a physique, they're like, look at that person, they don't know what they're doing. Or you go to work and people didn't work out and you're looking down on them. This is the mind's ego. But you could also just go to the gym and be like, hey, this is for me. I like this body to be fit, and I'm just going to go here and do my workout. I'm not measuring and comparing myself to other people about my workout or what they do. It's just, this is what this body needs, and this is what I'm going to do. And if other people choose to work out, fine. And if they don't, that's fine too. That's their choice. I'm not going to judge them or look down on them or look up to them just based on their appearance. So it's not about whether you go work out or not. It's about what's going on in your mind during the workout and then afterwards, of course, as well. So that's where your mindfulness comes in. You need to be able to have this awareness of mind. So part of that is to know what conceit is, so that whenever you see the conceit coming up, you let it go. So you already shared a few things that it sounds like you're working out for the intention of just being healthy, right? And that's your intention, that's your goal. But you still need to look at the mind, because sometimes as the body is becoming more and more healthy, that's where the conceit and the personal existence view can come in. So you just need to be careful of that. And that's where the Eightfold Path is going to help you to be able to get those skills and abilities and then apply them. So if you're coming tomorrow, you'll be able to learn those things. Or if you can't come tomorrow, it's recorded, so you'll be able to learn it that way too. Mm-hmm. Okay. You have a question?
One more simple question, I hope. So how to raise a child in a culture that pushes you to look proper, like clean, let's say, like clean clothes, and you send the child to school, and the school kind of requires that they come dressed neat. And then, so how to approach this if they have a stain, or like the school would want them to look in a certain way, or how to maybe at home approach them and say that this is maybe that what is required, but this is not actually how it represents you. I'm just curious how you would approach that.
Yeah, so you're always guiding to help them cultivate wisdom. So my son has gone to 3 different schools at different times. In the first school that he used to go to, they used to wear a uniform, and it was a pretty nice uniform. They had this really shiny belt and stuff like this. So even when he was going to that school and I would be sometimes helping him get dressed and he would be putting on his belt, I would say things to him like, okay, I'm putting on this belt. This is really nice. This is really shiny. Is it this belt that determines whether or not you're a good person or not? Is that determine who you are as a person? And he's like, no, Dad, you taught me that that's not what that means. I was like, so what is the belt for? He's like, just to hold up the pants. And that's it. I was like, perfect. Right. So you can kind of like integrate these little teachings, because children sitting down in a 2-hour talk like this, it's not going to happen, right? So you give these little 30-second, little 10-second, 20-second little teachings here and there to be able to help them. So like your daughter, if you see her like making her hair look nice, you're like, wow, your hair looks really beautiful. Let's talk about this. Does this define who you are? Like if your hair is beautiful, does that make you a better person? And if your hair was messy, does that make you less of a person? And you see what she says, because then you'll see what's going on in her mind. And then if she's like, yeah, if my hair is messy, I'm not good. I'm a bad person. And if my hair looks nice, then that means I'm a good person. I'm not so sure I agree with this. Why is it that you think that way? Right? And you just kind of walk them through it, because you're not trying to tell them what to think. You're not trying to impose your ideas on them, but you're trying to help them to see true reality by bringing the wisdom internally, intrinsically. So you have a discussion with them and kind of lead them to understanding without forcing them or controlling them to think a certain way. And you just give them this little guidance along the way as they're doing certain things. And you can even do it like if she has dolls, like baby dolls, you can even do it with the baby dolls where she's talking about the baby dolls. And like, let's just say she has one and you have one, and her hair on her baby doll looks really beautiful, and you like mess up the hair of your baby doll, and you ask her like, which one is a better person? And then she's like, oh, the one with the beautiful hair. Well, why do you think that way? My baby doll looks just fine too, right? And we don't need to judge them. We don't need to compare them. They're both beautiful, right? And you can have these kinds of discussions. You're going to need to do it multiple times. It's not going to be just one time that you have these kinds of discussions. Yep. Okay. So I don't see any more questions. So I'm going to end by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest in learning and growing and developing. Thank you for everyone online as well. If you guys would like to learn more, there's plenty of opportunities for you to do that. This evening at 6:30, we have a meditation in the main hall where you're welcome to come if you like. We just do meditation, and then I just open up to questions that students have. And they have the walking market going on at that time. So if you're coming for the walking market, or if you'd like to join into the walking market, you can explore the walking market. So you can just stop by here at 6:30 and meditate in the main hall if you like. And then at 9 p.m. tonight, I'm going to be teaching the same class from here again, because I do it twice a day for people like in Europe right now. They're sleeping. So if they would like to join a live class, I teach 2 live classes per day, and I do it here at the temple. So you're welcome to come for meditation, or if you meet other people today that would like to come, they're welcome to come tonight at 9 p.m. And then as you heard, this week I have a course called Harmony in Relationships, which is 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, where I'm going to be teaching all the different topics about how to produce harmony in all your relationships. Because in the unenlightened state, you will have a certain amount of disharmony in your relationships. But you can get to a point where all your relationships are harmonious. But you're going to need to know the wisdom of how to actually do that. So you can come to any part of that course that you like. You can come for the entire course, and you would benefit more that way. But if you're not going to be here for the entire time, or you've got other things, you can actually come and go as you please. So you're welcome to attend attend that as well. So whatever you guys decide to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.